Hello, everybody. Welcome to this teaching demonstration from me. I'm Zach Aaronholtz, Mr. Aaronholtz, whatever you want to call me. That is perfectly fine. These chapters covered so much that I really wanted to focus on one particular thing. So this chapter starts off right at the end of the Civil War and goes into the growth of the American economy and how people started growing. And so the introduction of robber barons became a big part of American society after the Civil War. And the introduction of these different robber barons and this new empire that America was starting to become. Then, like the next chapter, talk about President McKinley and everything that he did, as well as President Roosevelt and the growth of progressivism within the United States. That's just a brief overview of what these chapters talked about. But for the teaching lesson that I want to give today, I really wanted to focus on robber barons and what they did in American society and whether we should cherish them as people who lived out the American dream and became these successful men, or if they should actually be more remembered for the lives they ruined to get to where they were and how selfish some of them may have become. And so that's just a brief overview of what we're going to be talking about today. And so let's get right into it. So here I'm going to share my screen for my presentation. All right, let's go to, if I can see. That's not what I wanted. Oh, there we go. See, I had to move it. I couldn't see it. There we go. Play from the start. Perfect. So, guys, obviously today we're going to be talking about robber barons and exactly what, who these people were, what they had to go through to get to where they were, and as well as the way they impacted American society. And that's just exactly what this is kind of a perfect lesson. This is not a lot of things that people know about are these robber barons. Like obviously some of these names you've definitely heard of before that we're going to cover, but a lot of people don't know this particular part in American history. A lot of people remember the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, World War II, recent history. This is the little sweet spot in there between the Civil War and World War One that a lot doesn't get a lot talked about. You know, between this and the events that happened in between the Revolutionary War and Civil War, these events just don't get talked about a lot, either within American society or just even within just classrooms in general. And so this is a topic I really wanted to talk about. So today we're going to talk about robber barons. And so before we can talk about robber barons, though, we have to talk about what is the American dream. We hear about this all the time about how living in America, you have to. There's this ultimate American dream, but what does that mean in particular? This can mean so many different things for so many different people. Because for me and personally, my American dream is just to get as high up in an education system as possible, hopefully become a coach somewhere as well. I just want to teach kids or students basically to become the best versions of themselves, as well as to strive for perfection. Even though I know perfection, you can attain perfection, but if you strive for it, you will achieve excellence. That's something that I want to instill in a lot of people's minds. I want to be that role model that people can go to, and so that's my American dream, is to become just to become the best version of myself and hopefully instill that in other people as well. But a lot of people, this varies, you know? And so the actual definition of the American dream is that the ideal by which equality of opportunity is available to any American, allowing the highest aspirations and goals to be achieved. So it doesn't matter anyone in America, they can have their goals and they can go out and achieve it. Everyone has different goals in their lives. Like obviously I stated mine. Other people have way higher goals than what I do. Like as a kid, I wanted to be an astronaut. That was my dream. I wanted to be an astronaut. And then, obviously reality set in. I realized I'm not that much into space. And so, and a lot of people, this is very different. Like obviously for a lot of people, the American dream is getting a house and getting a lot of money. Most of that is delved like within the business industry. That's where you get most of your money. And so uh, the American dream, obviously, it varies for a lot of people, but the basically ideal version of the American dream is allowing just to find a dream and achieve it. Like any dream of what you wanted to be, inspiring those aspirations. And honestly, within the American dream, a lot of money is involved. And that's basically the big part of what the American dream is. And so after learning about what the American dream is, what are robber barons? Now, some of these men, like I talked to my brother about this because I told him about what I'm going to do for this teaching demonstration. He was like, some of these men weren't robber barons because some of them did good things, and I'm like, hey, you can be a robber baron and still good do things, because robber baron does, it kind of seems like a derogatory term for some of these people, but in reality, it's not, because this is the definition of what a robber baron is. A robber baron is a person who has become rich through ruthless and uh, excuse me, unscrupulous business practices. It is originally with reference to prominent U.S. businessmen in the late 19th century, which is exactly what we're going to be talking about today, is those businessmen who stepped along a lot of people along the way to get to where they were. Some of the people, they grew up really poor. And so this is the only way they knew how to live life, is to, you had to step on people to get to where you wanted to be. And so this is exactly what they needed to do. But like, some of these men that we'll learn about did good things within American society. One person in particular, we'll talk about later, he dedicated some of his wealth to the education system and to science and everything like that. But he did step on a lot of people along the way, and through these ruthless business practices to grow his industry. And so he is a robber baron. And so this is just what American society was in the 18th century, is that these people, these businessmen were ruthless people that they just wanted everything for themselves. They wanted to grow what they had, and based on that as well, during that time, minimum wage could be whatever they wanted it to be. And most of the people who worked for these men did not get paid a lot of money, because the money they wanted was for themselves. And that's part of the ruthless business practices. And so these robber barons had such a big impact on American society and the economy, and how well they grew and how much power they instilled, and all because how much they grew their business. But because of their growing their business, they had to do this. They had to step up on people along the way. They had to grow their industry through these ruthless methods. And like obviously there could have been different ways to do this, but how wealthy they became was through these methods that today could never be used. And so I have a short video. Oh no, sorry. That's next slide. This is a political cartoon that I really wanted to show you guys, because this is just it paints such a picture that I found very fascinating. So if you look on top at the four big men there, those are obviously the robber barons sitting there with all their wealth. You can see that they're all fat, and they're sitting there just being like on top of all this money and everything that they ever really wanted. Now, what I want you to do, like, I'll give you like 20 seconds. Just look around and see everything else that you see. Like, is it who do you think those people are on the bottom? Is it on an island? Because you can see water. Why do you think it has all these different uh, dollar values along the way? So I'll give you about 30 seconds to a minute just to think about it. Um, so yeah, go ahead. All right, I don't want to stay too quiet too long, exactly, because you're not here, so I can't really hear your thoughts. But it's just very interesting. If you look at the people all along the bottom, they're holding up all of this stuff that they own. And like iron workers, $7 a week, $7 a week. Minimum wage in South Dakota is $9.20. And that's, you get $7 in a week just for working on the irons. Lumber workers, $6 a week. Leather workers, $7 a week. I guess technically the best dollar value within this is linen workers. The average is at $11 a week. But these are just low cost, and like these men don't give out any of their wealth, really. They barely pay their employees. These people are who these guys are holding up their business, because these are the hard workers. These people work for these men, but they're getting no benefits of the doubt, and they're getting absolutely not like no money in return except for $11 at the max per week, which is just sad to see. And so, like another thing you could look at is like, look at the water. This is hard times. And they're sitting there and they're sitting in the water these hard times, holding up everything that these guys own. And it just shows that these robber barons really stepped on a lot of people to get to where they were and did a lot of these ruthless practices to get as much money as they could. Yeah, we'll learn eventually that some of these men, like obviously how they got there was terrible, but when they retired and had their wealth, they donated a lot away. Some of these people were just complete jerks, and we'll figure that out along the way. And so the next slide, there is a short YouTube video I'm going to show you guys that I found just very fascinating. And so here we go.
What are we looking at? Robber barons. Who were the richest tycoons in America? In the late...
I just realized I can't share. So, okay, new share. There we go. Perfect.
Robber barons. Who were the richest tycoons in America? In the late 19th century and early 20th century, there were Americans who made vast amounts of wealth. These tycoons gained the derogatory nickname robber barons because of the questionable methods they used to acquire their fortunes and build their vast industrial empires. Andrew Carnegie, Steel, net worth $310 billion US. Andrew Carnegie was born in poverty in Scotland and emigrated to the United States as a child. Here, he worked as a bobbin boy in a cotton factory in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He then worked as a telegraphic operator and a railroad worker. As a railroad worker, he would invest in iron and oil companies. He recognized a need to replace wooden bridges with newer steel bridges for the railroads being built across America. Turning his focus to producing steel during the 1870s, using the Bessemer steel-making process, he would become extremely successful in the industry and contribute to America's surpassing of Great Britain's steel output from 1890. Later, he would form the Carnegie Steel Company. In 1892, the Homestead Strike emerged when his company tried to lower wages and increase working hours in what were dangerous conditions. A battle would break out in Carnegie Steel's main plant in Homestead, Pennsylvania, between workers and Pinkerton detectives, which only came to an end when 8,000 armed state militia were brought in. He would sell the Carnegie Steel Company to J.P. Morgan's United States Steel Corporation in 1901 for what was then $480 million US. When Carnegie retired at 64, he devoted his life to philanthropy. In his generosity, he funded a vast number of public libraries, universities, and charities around the world. John D. Rockefeller, oil, net worth 300 to 400 billion US. John D. Rockefeller would make his riches in the oil industry and is considered by many to be the wealthiest man in American history. At age 16, Rockefeller started off as a humble bookkeeper in Cleveland, Ohio. In the 1860s, he started investing in the petroleum industry and took over local refineries by buying them out. At the age of 31, he started the Standard Oil Company, and at one point, a cartel was used, an unfair practice of forcing competitors to pay extortionate shipping costs, where his company paid low prices for such services. This would drive his competitors out of business. By 1890, Standard Oil controlled 90% of the oil in the USA. This monopoly led to the Sherman Antitrust Act in the same year. In his later years in retirement, Rockefeller donated his wealth to philanthropic causes. Cornelius Vanderbilt, water transport and railroads, net worth 105 to 205 billion US. Vanderbilt was born in Staten Island, New York in 1794. He was a son of a boatman and quit school at age 11 to work on his father's ferry. At age 16, he purchased his own boat by borrowing money from his parents and made profit by ferrying commuters into Manhattan. During the War of 1812, He used his boats to transport supplies to forts along New York Harbor. After this, Vanderbilt started to develop a steamship business while working for Thomas Gibbons as a steamship captain, and in 1829, he was working for himself. He then dominated the maritime trade along the Hudson River, offering better fares than his competitors. The California Gold Rush of 1849 provided another opportunity, so Vanderbilt created a service called the Accessory Transit Company, which would transport passengers and cargo through Nicaragua towards California on the West Coast. He made an offer to his competitors, which were close to ruin. He would end the Accessory Transit Company, which was more efficient than their transportation methods, if he was paid a stipend of $40,000 a month, an offer they accepted and increased when he threatened to open it again. At 70, he moved from shipping to railroads and acquired the New York Central Railroad. Eventually, he had rail lines reaching as far as Chicago. J.P. Morgan, banking. Net worth, 42 billion US dollars. The son of a banker, John Pierpont Morgan, went to Harvard University, and once he graduated, worked at the banking firm George Peabody and Company in London, then became an accountant in Duncan, Sherman and Company in New York. In 1861, he became an agent of his father's bank. During the American Civil War, he became involved in a financing scheme known as the Hall Carbine Affair, where he purchased 5,000 rifles for $3.50 each from the government and resold them back for $22 each. In 1871, he formed the Drexel, Morgan and Company with Anthony Drexel, which became the J.P. Morgan and Company in 1895, after Drexel had died. During this time, he also formed the merger, General Electric. J.P. Morgan became an important financier of the railroads across America, and in 1901 helped form the first billion-dollar corporation in American history, the United States Steel Corporation, a merger that included the giant Carnegie Steel Company. While his wealth was more modest than other robber barons, J.P. Morgan is importantly known as the person who reduced chaotic competition by merging companies to bring order to the American economy. He would also help Wall Street get through the financial crisis known as the Panic of 1907. Subscribe for more history videos.
All right. So there's that. We'll stop sharing with that. Now let me get back to the presentation. All right. So there's that video for you. Now, even though we're not going to talk about the Vanderbilt, we're not going to talk Cornelius Vanderbilt, we're going to talk about the other three as well as two other robber barons. We're going to talk about the three that were in the video. We're going to talk about them first, and then we're going to talk about the other two after that. And so the first person we want to talk about, Andrew Carnegie. Obviously, his industry was within the steel industry, and a lot of things that you're going to realize for these robber barons that are very similar is that their businesses all revolved around the railroads, and so and how vast that started to become. Now, Carnegie, he was born in Scotland. He is basically the definition of rags to riches. He was born poor. He came to America very, very poor. He started working in a cotton factory in Pittsburgh as a bobbin boy, and he got paid $1.20, I believe, a day. That was ridiculous. After he did that for a while, he started working on the railroads, and when he started working on the railroads, he started investing in these businesses, and that eventually led to him in 1870, where he co-founded the Carnegie Steel Company. Now, basically, like, even though like he is this definition of rags to riches, he has had some rough patches within his life as well. The main one being those homestead strikes, where he wasn't actually there to help with the strikes, but the person that was running the steel company at the time that was in Pittsburgh, the company there, he called Carnegie, and Carnegie's like, you gotta do everything you can just to save the factory. Okay, these strikers can't get in because they're just going to ruin everything, and that eventually led to the 8,000 militia coming and just stopping this strike. And so like those homestead strikes definitely harnish his reputation. But when he retired, he has been on record saying, "The man who dies thus rich dies disgraced." And basically what he means by that is that, I can't die with all this money if I didn't put it to good use, and because of that, he gave away over $350 million to many, many different industries. Notably, he funded the establishment of over 2,500 libraries, 7,600 organs to churches, and other different endowed organizations. And as well, he gave money out for research into science and education and world peace and many other causes. He gave out that much money back to the American society. I personally can say I have a Carnegie library within my hometown, and so that's just kind of interesting to find out. As well as there's a church in my area that I know I went and sung at, and they have one of the original Carnegie organs there as well, which is just very fascinating to see that that's history right there. Like that library I went to every day, he funded that. That's just it's very fascinating to find these things out while you're doing research. And it's just that's something that's really cool, a little nitpicky, but really like really not nitpicky, but really small. But it's so cool to find out. And so there's about Carnegie. Carnegie is honestly one of the nicer robber barons because even though he didn't step on a lot of people to get to where he were. It's just that all those homestead records and he kept those costs at still like those minimum wages really, really low. And so, but like he is obviously he's not the worst robber baron there is in the world. Actually, the last guy that we're talking about is really, really bad. But anyway, that's basically the overview of Carnegie. The next person we want to talk about is John D. Rockefeller. If his name sounds familiar, Rockefeller Plaza within New York. If you ever watch any New York news stations, most of them are on Rockefeller Plaza because they'll be like live in Rockefeller Plaza, especially the Today Show. They use that. Rockefeller, his industry was within the oil industry, and he is definitely a guy who stepped on a lot of people to get to where he got to be. He was the founder of the Standard Oil Company, and within just a few times when he owned 90% of the oil within America, he became the richest man in the world, which is just bonkers to think about. And he was also the very first American to be worth $1 billion. And like that is just insane. It's just insane. And so the big thing about Rockefeller, his like big criticism was he was accused of engaging on those unethical practices, predatory pricing, so like obviously in the video, if you remember listening to it, is that other oil companies, when they had to transport the items, those prices would be so much higher when he had to deal with it. But like when he got through, it was way cheaper. And so those companies, they didn't have the money to do it and they went bankrupt. And so he would just take those oil just right from them. That's how we got to 90% of American oil was owned by him. He colluded with railroads to eliminate his competitors in order to gain a monopoly in the industry. Yeah, exactly. He did all that to get as much oil as possible, which is just sad to hear because all those people in those industries, they lost so much because they saw what Rockefeller was doing and tried doing that, trying to just get their foot in the door, and Rockefeller just kind of came in and shut them down. Basically, that's what he did to a lot of people. But by the time he was retiring and everything like that, he also donated more than $500 million to various philanthropic causes. He took most of those ideas of when he donated to that. He took those ideas from Carnegie. He saw what Carnegie did and decided that's what he should probably do with the money that he has been given or earned, I would say. And he donated his money to different causes as well. All right, so the next guy we're going to learn about, obviously another guy from the video, is JP Morgan. His big thing was that he was just really good at finance. Like he really didn't invest in a lot of like time in just one business. He was just really good at combining different things, like taking one company, putting together and just doing that. He was really good at that. 1892, he arranged the creation of General Electric. In 1901, he formed the United States Steel Corporation by buying Carnegie Steel for $487 million, as well as the other different companies within the steel industry. And which another fascinating fact is that U.S. Steel became the first billion-dollar company in the world with 1.4 with the net worth of $1.4 billion. So that's very interesting. In the world, the first billion-dollar company was owned by JP Morgan, which was U.S. Steel. Morgan he helped stabilize the American financial market during the economic crisis, which the third bullet note you actually can see is that he led Wall Street out of that financial crisis in 1907. He helped did that, but he was criticized that he had way too much power, and accused of manipulating the nation's financial system for his own. Like, because he worked with Wall Street, and so he would people were very critical that he just tried, fixing not America, but just trying to make him wealthier. And so that's what he was basically criticized for. A little fun fact I found about J.P. Morgan while doing real research was that he was actually supposed to be on the Titanic. He kind of helped. He helped with the process of the building of the Titanic, and so he, like in 1911, he helped uh, say it was good to go. I think I'm trying to remember exactly what it said, but in 1912, he was actually supposed to be on the Titanic, but he had to cancel for some reason, and that's just very interesting to see. Would he have died if he was on the Titanic? No, I don't think so, because of how much he was worth during the time. I think he would have been the first one on the lifeboat. I don't think anyone would have criticized, except for people who couldn't, like people who knew they were never going to get on a lifeboat. And they're like, dude, what the heck? I want to be on a lifeboat. But I feel like he would have been fine either way. It's just very interesting. He was supposed to be on the Titanic. So just a little fun fact about J.P. Morgan for you. All right, the next guy is a new guy that we haven't talked about yet. Well, he was in the video. His name was Andrew W. Mellon. His industry's stretched for many different things between aluminum, finance, and oil. He was actually one of the nicer robber barons, I would say, when I was doing my research. His financial ability led him to building large enterprises in aluminum and coke, which is just fuel. In the 1920s, he had $300 to $400 million in wealth, which was the third highest income tax behind Rockefeller and Henry Ford. So he was basically the third richest man in America during that time. And for how well he did with his finances, actually, he became the U.S. Secretary of the Treasury from 1921 until 1932, which for most of his time, he did a pretty good job until a certain event may have happened. You may have heard of it. But the thing with J.P. Morgan that is very fascinating is that he was a lover of art. Like when he retired and all that, he gave $25 million of art to the U.S. government in 1937, as well as $15 million he donated to build a national gallery of art. He absolutely loved art and considered it something that a lot of people needed in their lives, as well as to grow and for people to be creative. And so, like, he was a big advocate toward art in the I can't think of the word, just saving these art and just making sure that it stays preserved. There we go, preserved. Perfect, found it out. The big thing about him that he was really criticized for was definitely during the Great Depression, because once the Depression hit, he had no solution. He couldn't figure everything out, which was, at the time, that's really hard to do because you don't know how to really fix that. But he had no idea, and so it got to the point where he was actually at an impeachment process where people were about to impeach him from his role as the U.S. Secretary of Treasury. But then he eventually stepped down, and so that's his big criticism. So he was honestly one of the quieter guys that I wanted you to learn about, but also a very important figure in American society. I think people should know more about. My apologies. All right, the last guy. This guy was so much fun to figure out. Not because he was a great guy. He was an awful guy. Like, this guy was he was terrible. He was not a good guy. This guy's name is Jay Gould. His industry big. He was really big with the railroads, and he was a gold and railroads speculator. He hated strikes in the form of unions. He was a hard-nosed strike breaker. Like, do whatever you can, basically, to stop the strikes. He hated them basically because he was going to lose stuff. That was it. He didn't care about anyone but himself. Like, he was a hardcore, not a nice guy. And so that's why I found it really fascinating because those other robber barons that we learned about, like, obviously they had the criticism, but they either donated to society, helped through a financial crisis, helped the U.S. Secretary, loved art, This guy, nothing, absolutely nothing. He wanted to create a railroad connecting New York to Chicago, and he was also, this is kind of interesting as well. He was involved with a kidnapping plot of a British man because he swindled him $1 million. This guy's like just very interesting. He has been quoted saying, "I can hire one half of the working class to kill the other half." On record saying that. Like just learning about what he said and everything like that, how much he cared about other people within society is just insane. And so that's kind of the thing that I just want to hit home about this guy. Um, Gould gained control of the Western Union Telegraph Company after weakening the company. So like he really wanted control of that company. So what he did is he just took away all its profit and made sure people didn't go to it. And then he's like, "Oh, you have no money," and then took it over. And then it became, a bigger thing. And so like this guy was a dick. Like he was just so mean. Gould was always remained ruthless, unscrupulous, and friendless. I don't think he had a friend in his life. Um, to the point where he died, leaving a fortune estimated around $77 million. And he didn't give it to anyone. That was his money. He didn't leave a will. He didn't have a friends or this guy had nobody, which is honestly really sad to hear that he didn't have anybody. But this guy was an absolute uh, idiot, I guess I would say. I don't want to. This guy was just so mean. He did everything he could for himself. This is kind of the definition of what the biggest robber barons did, because this guy did nothing for American society, really, at least giving back. Because like obviously he grew the railroads and everything like that, but he did nothing to give back to American society with his wealth. He held on to it till he died, and even when he died, didn't get anyone. It was his, which is just very fascinating to learn about. So that's enough about Jay Gould. All right, that's the end of my presentation. So basically what I want you guys to do for your assignment and everything like that, I want you guys to go to D2L. There will be a discussion board on there. And so for the discussion, just right here, just select one of the robber barons that was taught about in this lesson. So one of the 5, you can choose whichever one you want. I personally would go with Gould just because, I don't understand how he did that, how he could be so heartless. But that's just me. First, I'll list what industry they were a part of, and also one interesting fact that you found fascinating about them. And after that, give your opinion on whether that man should be remembered for living the American dream and be remembered as a successful businessman, or should be remembered for the many people that he stepped along the way, how much evil he did. That's what you should go talk about, as well as respond to one other person's discussion as well, and that will be your assignment. All right, I'll stop sharing here. All right, thank you guys for listening. As always, if you guys have any questions, feel free to email me at zach.aaronholtz@coyotes.usd.edu. You should be able to find it on D2L under like class, the class list. You should be able to find it there. Email me if you have any questions, if you want a link to the presentation as well. Anything along those lines, the link to the video, if that would help as well, just let me know. I'll get that to you. I thank you guys for listening as always, and have a wonderful day.